welcome. What could you tell us about your story to start with? How did you end up where you are?
First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to come along today and say hello and talk about my story and what I do. I've never had a true vocation. I was one of those people kind of flitted around. So I made the mistake of getting married very young at the age of 19. And I left university to get married, not because I was pregnant or anything, but I made that mistake and I wanted to be in the clothing industry, and that's what I wanted to do. So I was a dressmaker from home for a few years. My husband at the time, sounds like I had loads of them, by the way, I've only had two, and he had a recording studio. So I was involved with the music. So as you can see behind me, a piano, so I sing, I write songs. And then I decided, actually, you know, in mid-20s, that things weren't working for us. I hadn't got a qualification, so I went back to university and did an HND in hotel and catering management. Came out of that and joined Obbins for a bit. I'd left my husband, working for Obbins, doing all those zany pictures on the glass, if you remember. And that's, you know, I wanted to work with wines. And then I met my husband, we moved down, and I did a secretarial course, and I became a PA for the consumer director of Compact Computer Limited in the 90s, which was fantastic. So I've always been very arty. I've always been service-based, because obviously going from, you know, working, you know, as a dressmaker to hotel and catering management to retail, it's all service. And then I decided that I had a baby, and I went on maternity leave. And because my husband's in insurance, we were incredibly cautious. So we bought our house for just his, based on his wages and not on mine. And that set us in good stead, actually, to be fair. And so I was a mum at home for 5 years, and I was taking lots of pictures. I mean, my son is 21 next month. I was taking lots of pictures of him with just a point and shoot Canon, which was film. And, you know, doing loads of sets for my friends who've got babies, you know, we go to a little party and people saying, gosh, that's a really good picture. And I just started from there. You'll find a lot of photographers, particularly women photographers, start because of their children. And that's how that happened to me. So when my son was about 4 or 5, you know, my husband said, do you think you should go back to work now? And I said, well, what about after school? What about holidays? And okay, I decided, well, let me just do a course. And, you know, so I did this City and Guilds basic and silver darkroom as well, which I think for me I look back and it was an incredible experience, mainly because people could just go straight to digital and they don't know the process. They don't understand how an image can be formed via film and going into the darkroom and creating it instead of just a flick of a button on Photoshop. So for me, did the course. It was just a year's course, did really well. City and Guilds, you either pass or fail. And my tutor said, you know, you've got 98% in both elements. So for me, that was quite an endorsement. So I thought, well, I said to him, what do I do next? I don't want to go on to do a degree course. I was about 40 at the time, because that's another 3 years out of my life. And so he said, well, one of my students is doing this course, which was the ABC Diploma in Professional Practice of Photography at the London College of Communication, part of the University of Arts. It's where Rankin went in Elephant and Castle. So I applied, and of course, you know, it was July and they were full for that year. So I waited until the following year to actually put in my application, and I was successful. And so when my interview, I remember saying to David, who was one of the tutors there, I said, well, what do you think? And he said, I think you should be here, which was a great thing for me, and great for my, gave me a boost. And so I started my course in 2006, and it was working with professional photographers. All the lecturers were professional photographers. They were working, so we really got an insight into their work and what they do. So it's like an art foundation course, but for photography. So we did anything from, you know, landscape events to large format as far as advertising work to and for me, I was drawn with children. So we went on and got to the end of the course. I didn't do interiors or architecture. That was using, you know, the big 12:8 large format cameras at the time. I mean, they got tilt and shift lenses now, but then it was still film, and it just wasn't me. I needed people in my life, and so I dropped that part of it in the first part of the session, and then at the end, when we had our end of year show, I came out with distinction. So I started my business then in 2007. And what I've had to learn is I had the basics of being, you know, a good photographer, but that isn't enough to run a business. I had to learn to be a business person first. And that's been the biggest thing, actually. So I know so many poor, wonderful, talented photographers, but they haven't grasped the business side of it. And so I've just grown my business. I was six-figure business about 3 years ago, but I'm 57 next month, and I just got, you know, doing so many shoots for me. Unless you've got a studio and people working for you, I just found, do you know what, I'm a bit tired because there's a lot of work with everything I was doing. So I've actually changed the mix that I do now. So with my family work, I do the shoot. I also show products for them to buy. So it's not just they call it a shoot and burn. It is actually, I produce fine art books. I do bespoke framing for them via my suppliers. And so everything is product based. So they have something tangible at the end of it, as well as the digital images. But for me as a family photographer, to have that edge of the quality to give to my clients, so they've really got it, you know, there for them for life, that can be passed down from generation to generation. That takes up, you know, that's a proportion of my turnover. So I've predominantly families. I'm changing the shift now. So I work with nurseries, and so the profit is more in nurseries because I'm doing bulk, so the price is smaller. And with my personal branding photography and also my corporate work, that's all profit. So those are the three areas of my business.
You are a true, I love this sort of just going, no, yeah, nope, going, which obviously I love, being a career change pro. Is that even a term? So do you think, listening to all your sort of qualifications that you have, do you think that is necessary to make it or to start out in photography?
I don't think so, but for me personally, it gave me confidence. I think qualifications, there are lots of organizations out there that, the one thing with photography, it's not monitored. You could have one person who's got a wealth of experience and qualifications, but from experience, clients don't actually look to see what qualifications you have. But that's the problem in our industry, is that there isn't one set level. So you've heard about all these, you know, people charging £200 for a wedding, and the people very disappointed because with the results, well, you do pay for what you get, you do get what you pay for. However, there's no standard in our industry, which is a real shame, because I think it would make people, I think certainly in retail, we're kind of, I think it would be really help the customer find out, you know, who is good, and say, oh, you've got this qualification or that qualification. There is the BIPP, there is the Societies of Photographers, the SWPP, there is the Master Photographers Association, there's the Guilds of Photographers, which are all geared more towards social photography. But even so, I've got, you know, a particular qualification, licensure in photography, and I could have an associate or a fellowship. But do people ask for me? People ask for it? No, they don't. And so it's a difficult one, really. But I think from a confidence point of view and a growth point of view, I think qualifications are important, because you have a mentor that helps you and shows you things actually you haven't seen in your own photography. So from a growth point of view and confidence, I think it's important.
Can we have some advice on qualifications, because that is something I've been looking at. I'm lucky enough to get as part of the package, they give me a grant, or anybody, to do further training. Now, obviously, in our stage in life, I'm a little older than you, but I don't want a course that goes on forever.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is it, are there any good 6-month courses or 1 day a week courses for a year, or what would you? I much prefer in person. I know COVID and all that means that might not be possible, but hopefully things will change than online stuff. I like the interaction with people. You got any recommendations?
I would actually go down the route of, unless you start a degree course. The course that I did at the London Education, I don't think they do anymore, which was a shame because it was such a good career change course.
It's the practical stuff, because I have spoken to people who've done degrees, and a lot of the stuff doesn't interest, concepts about album covers and stuff they were doing as projects. That's not, I want practical, technical help, and maybe a bit of help about how to set a business up. Not that that's, Then
I think the societies, any of those organisations I mentioned, they do mentoring service. So it's actually finding out exactly as well, at the moment you said earlier about you enjoy garden photography.
Yes, yeah.
And it's actually finding your focus, but certainly talking to, oops, Daisy, so this is mine to stop the light getting in front of me. Balancing act. Yes, so talking to one of them, they do a mentoring. When you join their organisation, they do a mentoring. So
who is that? So which organisation is that, please?
So all of them. So it's the BIPP.
Yeah.
There is the SWPP, but they also have, they call them, a group of societies called the Societies, it's called. There's also the Guild of Photographers, and also the Master Photography Association, the MPA. So they do have a mentoring system there for qualifications, but also they're very good as a body to offer advice. And there's a lot of their members who are either judging or their advisors are active in training. Yeah. And of course, I've been on, I love the one-to-one courses, but also when there's a course, say 6-7 people, that's always good. There is hopefully later on this year, we're going to be having the photography show at the NEC, which obviously hasn't taken place, but that will happen at some point. And there are usually, when you go there, you will find loads of training organisations that can offer training.
Given that you were saying it's not regulated as an industry, and Joe Public has no idea what what they might be purchasing, when you're looking at training courses, are there any kind of key questions you should be asking of the trainer to make sure that what you're getting from them, as it were, will set you up to be a good photographer?
I would actually ask them how long they've been in business. I think if you've got someone who's been in business more than 10 years, that's a good indication that they're old school. Because I think if you're training someone, you need to know, a lot of the people I go with, for instance, for training, they know film. So they know the transition, and they've got a lot more to offer. So I would actually look for someone who's got the experience. And in the photography, and they've got a good portfolio. Looking at the portfolio, looking at they would have, if they're doing training, they would have reviews, or they'd look at the reviews of people, or even actually, if it's looking all good, ask to speak to one of the people who've done training with them to get insight, external insight into how the training benefited them.
Okay, yeah.
Answer your question, Carl?
I think so, to a degree, yes. Just out of interest, Annie, whereabout in the country do you live?
I live in Kingston upon Thames.
Right, okay.
So and I also really like what you were talking about in terms of the business side. I remember when I was training to be a personal trainer, there were loads of great people who could lift a lot of weights in the gym, but they were absolute rubbish actual personal trainers and don't make any money. So on these courses, do they actually tell you how to run a business?
It really, you go for one thing or the other, really. I think some people offer training in business and a course in one-to-one photography or in a group setting, or you've got people who are purely focused on the business of photography. I'm trying to give an example. There was a wonderful company that I went to actually about 18 months after I left college, they were called it was called Aspire. They're since not around because so many people who've set up in business as a photographer after 3 years are setting up themselves up as trainers. That's the reason why I look at people who've been around for a while. I forgot to say, there's the experience group. I forgot to mention that Mark Cleghorn is absolutely brilliant as a trainer and in business. So I'd really highly recommend him and his experience group. And actually the fees, they take you through a mentorship for a year. But they're still working photographers. They're not, or you train and then you start work. These are working photographers getting more experience of business. So I really highly recommend him. So I went on to the Aspire course, which was actually, I knew the photography side of it. I didn't know how to sell. And it was £800 for 3 days. And I thought, and that was as much as my course did for a year. So I was very reluctant for a long time to understand, to pay that out, because I thought this has really got to, really got to claim the money back on this. But the value of it, I recouped my money within about 2 weeks by doing things the way they suggested in marketing and also in selling, particularly, family work. So for me, it was hugely beneficial.
What did you learn? What was it that changed as a result of it?
Well, before, instead of just for my family work, instead of just putting it online and letting people choose or just sell a disc, for instance, it was a disc then, sorry, I'm showing my age, aren't I? It was actually learning how to help the client to choose images in them one-to-one to get their order. Instead of just leaving them to it and say, Annie, we've got this, but actually being with them one-to-one and helping them through that process to get to their final order. For me to be there, showing, well, I can put this together for you. Let me show you. Ta-da! And with them in the process. And I would get a much bigger sale by doing that than if I was just going to leave them online for them to choose.
Yeah, interesting.
So it's a selling technique, but and in fact, it's part of my service to actually help the client, because you want them to get the best experience from me. I did a Zoom one this week, for instance, and a lot of photographers wouldn't bother with doing a Zoom after the shoot, but they've been waiting for two years. They have got an extension. They've been waiting to get finished. There's no point actually thinking about wall art for them until they've actually had it all done. So I dropped my samples off to them and we had a Zoom consultation. And so I was able to say, well, how about having, instead of a big multi-frame there, how about having a big aluminium piece of art above the sofa? Let's get the tape measure out. And if I hadn't been there, they said, we hadn't even thought of that. They hadn't thought of having it in black and white. So that's what I learned on this course, that I wouldn't have known otherwise.
And it is, of course, also showing, you are the professional. I always love leaving it to the professionals. And I know it can speak from experience. So when, like I said, we moved from Switzerland 2.5 years ago.
Wow.
And we did a photo shoot just before we left, and last week I sent in this is what I actually want, because she had done that, because she is also a friend, so I guess she didn't want to push me. But had she kind of done more of a, I think these photos would be, that guidance, we would have had those things up on the wall by now.
Yes, that's right.
As it were, like you say, you leave it to my own devices, and it takes me 2.5 years.
And people don't like to talk about money. A lot of photographers shy away from talking about money, and actually that's really important to be confident about. A lot of people, because certainly for me, because I know I just do it, it comes so easy to me. And a lot of photographers, they just take a photograph, it's beautiful, but they just do it, and they don't see the value in what they do.
Yeah.
And therefore they sell very cheaply. And that's the problem with that. It's brought the industry down considerably because people are not seeing their own value.
Yeah, I'm curious about the sort of state of the market, because I think there's a lot of professions, you know, as people get a bit older, one of the things that we get asked quite a lot is almost sort of reflecting Cole's question, you know, I don't want to be in university for 3 years. I want to do something that's quick, that's easy, that isn't going to take too much time. And so I guess I'm wondering, as you know, as this kind of population of people over 50 grows and grows and grows, and the reluctance to go and do 3-year degree courses to make a change, the number of options available of things they can move into, you know, shrinks, if you like, because they're not, you know, may not be prepared to do structural engineering for 3 years. What's the state like of the market? You know, are there sort of more people in the photography world as photographers than there are clients around, do you think? What's your impression of this as a profession or as a sector to get into?
Well, there are thousands of photographers, but there always have been. And
Yeah.
The reason why I've had longevity is that I've been out there. You know, people who are seen are the people who market themselves. So you've got to do the channels of Instagram, of Facebook, and LinkedIn. LinkedIn's become very important to me in recent times. I'm getting work, a lot of LinkedIn at the moment, and also networking. You know, I would say I built my business on networking. And if you're a person who's going to be out there and be seen, and the others are just waiting by the phone because they've got a website, yeah, that's the difference. So it's people buy people as well. It's about, you know, it's the know, like, and trust. Yeah. You know, particularly with my family work, there is an investment. So an average sale for me is about £2,500. Obviously, part of that is product. But for me, for people to invest in me, there has to be trust. Yeah. But people have built a relationship or been on my newsletter, you know, for a while before they say, okay, well, let's finally do the shoot with Annie. Yeah, yeah. So basically, yes, there's a lot of competition, but it's possible to stand out. And almost what makes you stand out is you and your characteristics, the fact that you make that effort over and above to get seen and to get noticed. But it's with any business, any business. I mean, there are thousands of business coaches. Oh, God, tell me about it. So, and who are the people that you're drawn to? They're the people that you see often. They're the people that I meet in networking. Part of networking is doing one-to-ones as well, so it's not just the meeting itself, it's about doing a one-to-one with somebody to get to know about their business. So I mean, I had a one-to-one with a business coach last week. I mean, it would be lovely if she might be my client, but she may know someone who needs a photographer. But I was able to connect her up with something else. So in networking, it's a two-way street as well. You're out there to give as much as you are to receive, but that works. Yeah, yeah. No, fascinating. And I've definitely, I mean, part of the reason, you know, I came across you is because I've met you at various events. And I remember thinking, gosh, you do come across incredibly well when you kind of meet face to face. So okay. Can you do some bragging, but not so humbly? I know it's quite difficult, but maybe talk a bit about some of the achievements that you've had and the things that you're most proud of. Oh gosh,
that wasn't in one of the questions I sent her, Lucy.
Gosh, I mean, one of the things, I mean, to be different as a photographer, there's always award-winning photographers. They're everywhere, and you can't really use that to take somebody on board because everybody's an award-winning photographer. So I haven't really gone up the qualification street and the as I said, you know, people don't ask me for qualifications, so I haven't done loads of those. I've done loads of courses in photography, which I love, but I belong to this networking group called Sister Snog, and they're an executive women's group. They're now going to be predominantly online because it's going to be an online group, so anybody in the world can join. They are a wonderful group and I love them to bits, but there's some very, very intriguing women and inspiring women in that group. And I was encouraged to enter some awards, you know, as in Business Awards. So about 18 months ago, I entered the F Entrepreneur Awards for the 2020, and I was one of the top 100. And we were at the House of Lords last year, so that was fantastic. So I'm one of the top F entrepreneurs for 2020. I entered the Best Women in Business Awards, Best Business Women Awards, and I'm a finalist in Working with Families and Children category. So those are the two most, and the award ceremony is next month. Those are the two kind of things as far as awards I'm very proud of. I'm proud of the fact I'm still in the industry.
Well, and you were saying
I haven't
before
given
as well,
up, you know.
I mean, even
a very high failure rate in startups.
Yes, I think so, because people sell themselves too cheaply. I think it's all about, if you're selling something which is very visual, then everything to do with that business has to be beautiful. And, you know, I think someone said to me about 5 years into my business, and they said, I started my business the same time as you. They weren't a photographer. When you started up, you looked as if you'd been there forever, because everything, you know, the beautiful website, all my cards were beautiful. Everything I did, you know, it was aesthetically as if I'd been around for a long time. And I think when you set up a business, I really advise people not to just have something as a temporary measure. You want to have impact, and so it is investment in a good website, but it's really, really important.
Yeah.
So would you say that, I mean, in terms of barriers to entry, what I'm hearing is that it sounds actually quite low in terms of you don't need qualifications, you don't need degrees, but it could be a cost barrier to entry in terms of making sure that you don't just go with the cheapest Vistaprint business card.
Yes, and it's actually for me getting the right suppliers as well for my products, because obviously I'm only as, you know, the quality is only as good as my suppliers can give me. So I've done a lot of research in getting the right products for my clients, because obviously they're leather albums, leather bound albums, and I think the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge have had their wedding album done from the same made from the same company that I go to. So quality is important for me, because people want to know that that's part of my USP, that I'm quite high end of my family work. But no, I think as far as barriers are concerned, the biggest barrier in setting up a photography business is the cost, really. As I didn't actually skimp. I didn't say, oh, I'll just have this lens until, I buy the cheapest lens and then I'll upgrade at a later date. I bought for longevity, but also for the quality of image, because I wanted to set myself apart as being a professional. So instead, a lot of people say, well, I'll just buy one camera body for the time being. When you go on a job, you need two camera bodies, because what happens if one breaks down? You're not going to say, oh, I'm sorry, I've got to go home, get this mended before I come back to you. It's all about making sure that you have backups as well. So in my first year, I think my first year I took 5K in sales and a 15K loss. So I spent nearly 20K, on my business. Because, camera body, I use Canon. I'm going more to mirrorless now. I've still got an SLR, digital SLR, but I've got a mirrorless Canon, and that cost me recently 2.5K, the body. And you've got all the pro lenses then. And then I've got my desktop, I've got a laptop. My business, just to keep going without me doing anything at all, cost me £300 a month. And I work from home.
What are those standing costs?
Standing costs are, I've got my accountant, obviously, that's £120 a month. I've got, I belong to networking groups, so that's another £20 a month. I have Photoshop, I have Backblaze, What else? Yeah,
I've never heard of what's Backblaze.
Backblaze is an online cloud backup. So my desktop, as well as my external hard drives, are linked to the cloud. So if I have a catastrophic failure, I've got a backup.
Yeah, very sensible. And presumably insurance and all those other things too.
Oh yes, insurance for me is £600 a year. So that's without the incidental add-on costs. That's you know, July comes, I've got a £600 bill, and then I've got a thing called album exposure. So to show a client an album design that I put together as a possible idea for them, it flicks over like a pages. That costs me £150 a year. Yeah. So they're adding costs
up.
So I would say certainly £7,000–8,000 worth of costs per year without me doing anything at all.
Yeah.
That I think is.
I can see that. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And because people think, oh, it's just an image, you know, it's not worth anything. An image is my business.
Yeah.
So people say, well, can I have a few extra? I said, well, they're so much each. They say, oh, well, it's only this, but I know that it's my time. People don't understand my time and my talent equals a cost.
Of course.
Well, that's why you're a businesswoman.
That's right, absolutely. That's what I've had to learn.
That's why you're in business after, 14, 15 years, and they aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And what proportion, because you were mentioning before about, the level of turnover that you have been able to achieve. And I mean, it's very, very commendable. One of my very good friends is an artist, and he was saying, there are very few artists in the UK that turn over enough money just to support themselves. So most artists are, roofers or contractors or whatever it might be. But out of the artists that are able to support themselves, only something like 5% generate more than 100,000. Do you have any kind of sense as to, how many artists are at your level?
Well, I've come under the VAT threshold now, which is probably a bit of a relief. So I don't have that pressure to be working as hard as I did. And that's, for me, that's, drifting down now slightly. I would say, there are quite a few, actually. The family photographers I know are just keeping themselves under the VAT threshold. It can be done.
Okay.
The people who are more commercially minded, I think the men particularly are out there with the commercial work, and they're earning, probably 150. I know one family photographer earns 100. Well, the turnover is 150 plus. It hasn't been over the last year, 150 plus. So it can be done.
Yeah,
it's all about what's your value and what you're offering, what niche you're offering, and how much you want to work. For those people who've got studios, who say family studios, and they've got other photographers working for them, that obviously is going to be
higher turnover.
Yes, I mean there's one in Birmingham that the turnover was $1 million.
Wow.
So it just depends on how you're going to, what your business model, how you want to go forward, really. I know one commercial photographer, he's in advertising, and he's done Land Rover ads campaigns in the past, and it was 100,000 per campaign.
Wow. God, I so need to go into photography.
I wish I could do that.
But he was Donovan's assistant in the 70s. So he's got longevity. Yeah. He's got experience. He knows how. He's old school. Mm-hmm. And I think that
people. Knows about people. Been around to.
Yes, absolutely. He knows the people. And networking is always, I think networking business is always the key, because there's always someone who knows someone. And we were talking about the vaccines earlier with AstraZeneca. It was, if it just happened, I can't remember the relationship between the person who's he was head of the task force, but I think she's a friend of Boris, Oh, that
Dido Harding.
Aren't they all?
So it's all about, it's about who you know. Really, really helpful in business of who you know.
Amazing.
Now, I would just like to ask a question about sort of in lockdown. Obviously, we're now, well, I say obviously, hopefully we are coming out of lockdown and we won't go back to one again, blah, blah. But it's only interesting because I helped a fellow photographer with her virtual photo shoot last week. And I realized now that I looked at you're obviously doing it. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so like new and on it. But that was really exciting. How, in terms of keeping on top of new things, you know, where do we go from here, as it were?
I mean, the virtual shoots is, for me, it's quite new. Some people were doing them last year, but when July came, I found that the work, I was busy for the rest of the year, really. And even in November, I was still working one-to-one outside or was going to a nursery. So it wasn't, they were on my radar, but they weren't, because at the time the technology wasn't great. It was using FaceTime and actually screenshotting, or using Zoom and screenshotting, so it wasn't brilliant. And so I wasn't going to put my name to that. But there was this new app, a couple of apps have come out whereby you take control of someone's phone, and I've got one tomorrow in Spain, which is very exciting. So it wasn't for me something for me to do last year. This time, because my husband's 65, I've had COVID, he hasn't. I didn't want to take the risk of this variant being much more transmissible. So I've been staying at home. So for me, I've had no income over the last 2 months, except money that was owed to me from December.
Yeah.
So for me to start to do these virtual shoots is just a little bit more of a lifeline coming through. But if you create something that looks so good, and you've got a client over the road, over the the pond that likes your work, but can't come to you, then they're going to hire you because they like your style, because your style will still come through. So for me, it's been quite interesting to have this as on its own, as opposed to, oh, it's only just for lockdown. The way I found about it was being in Facebook groups with other photographers.
So
that's how you keep your ear to the ground, is being in photography groups and seeing what's going on.
Yeah,
exactly. Again, it comes down to networking. A lot of this, I am feeling, you can be a good photographer but not make any money and make it. But if you're a good photographer and know the right people, that's the way to go.
I really do believe that it's all about who you know. And I can give you a little of an analogy. I belong to Athena Group, which is I also belong to Kingston Chamber of Commerce. And Athena is a networking group for women. I've been a member 10 years, 12 years even. And I remember when I first started, I just did a £50 headshot special offer. And I met this woman called Pippa. And what she decided to do was to set up Q-Fates. And she loved the shoot I did for her. She loved a family shoot I did for her. So she said, Annie, we'd love to have you to have a stall at Q-Fates. I said, yeah, that's fine. I'd like to do that. And this was really successful. I met some fascinating people, and I have a stall every year. What happened though was the people I started to meet there, my clients, they would then recommend me to other people. So from that one contact, I've generated probably about £40,000 worth of work from that one contact. Which is just and even 2 years ago, I got a huge corporate job because one of the people that worked for this organisation had recommended me. So no, it's very, very good.
Can you introduce her to us? I'm just kidding.
But also,
does anyone else have any kind of questions that you wanted to ask Annie?
No, it's been very enlightening. I'm not quite ready to build an empire like you are. I was just something to keep me occupied. But no, it is food for thought. I think I can. I'm a sales director at AstraZeneca, so the networking, selling stuff, I hope I can get them. I just need to up my game technically, I think, so that I'm confident to deliver stuff that people want.
Yeah.
I think with, certainly I know one chap, he was in sales before he started his business. And he was an okay photographer. He wasn't the best, but his craft got better as the years went by, and then he started.
Sure, the more you do it, the better you get. No matter,
absolutely,
you know. I know.
With anything, I look at my work when I first started. It was okay, but it's not as good as what I do now. And my automatic reaction to a situation and what I'm looking for. But his business has soared, and he's not a wedding photographer now. He's actually specializes in headshots, and he's done so well. And he's a great photographer now. But it's all because it's a business person first that drove him, and not the talent. It's when people are very, that they're basing their business on their talent and not the business side. That's you've got to have the combination of the two in order to be successful.
Yeah.
So if you do set up a business, Carl, you know, you will be successful because you've got that.
What a bit of piece of
commercial. You've got that commercial awareness of what you need to do to do what you do.
Yeah, you know, and at 59, presumably, the pressure's off. You don't have to be generating an enormous income, but it certainly sounds, from what I've heard today, that you can turn this into a really nice business that keeps you active, that keeps you engaged, that gets you to meet interesting people.
It ticks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. And also, I belong to this thing called the Decor Cafe, which is a network of interior designers, and there's a group of us in the Business Hub, which so I'm one of the photographers. There's someone who's a coach. There's someone who's in marketing. But one of the things that we found is that there's lots of garden designers there, you know. So there's an interiors photographer, but there is a market there for garden photography. You know, you can be a specialist. I mean, photography is very wide. You know, I focus on people. So it works well to do families, corporate, and nurseries. They're all linked because all my corporates have families, and my families have got, you know, the father and the mother have got jobs. So for me, it's intricately linked.
Annie, what an amazing amount of knowledge you've got, and thank you. You know, you've been sharing it really generously and some really helpful tips. And I think just bringing the reality home for people to understand that this could possibly be an option, I think has been really, really helpful. Thank you.
It's my pleasure. I think that the one thing I want to, strike home is that it's running a business is completely different from being the art side of me, and you have to tame that bit and to be successful. And that's what I found, really. And get out there, see people, and that's how you're gonna make a business from it.
Yeah, brilliant.
All right,
fantastic,
brilliant message.
So it's anniearmitage.com, and Instagram I'm at Annie Armitage, LinkedIn at Annie Armitage, and what else is there? Oh yes, Facebook, Annie Armitage Photography. So if you just want to kind of put some likes my way, and that would be super. Thank you so much.
Will do. I will get straight onto it, Annie.
On my list, it was thank you, and then don't forget LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram.
Darling, I'm a businesswoman, so of course I'm going to mention those things.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, Annie. That's been wonderful. And I so wish that I was even a tad bit handy with a camera. Alas, I am not. On that note, I promised Annie it wouldn't go a minute over an hour, and it's now 10:59. Beep. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope to see you at another event soon.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you.